Hey, okay, we are back. Close this door to get it out of the way. And we are at lesson 6, and we are talking about the Virginia Company. So if you remember, the Virginia Company was the company that they told you that they were going to, that you were going to get to go and evangelize the Indians, and that's how they sold it. But most people knew they were not going to evangelize the Indians. They were going to look for gold or whatever their selfish desires were, maybe a better place, maybe to get away from going to jail in England. They thought it would be a better they had just heard all kind of propaganda. So they went for so many different reasons, but it was just men that went. Okay, so the Virginia Company was doomed from the start because it was built on lies. They left on 3 ships on December of 1606, but due to bad weather, they stayed 2 weeks right outside the coast of England. And they actually left at the worst time of the year for sailing. But the king was so bent on, we need to get a place in the new world. We need to make our name over in this new world, and we need to bring back gold, and we need to be wealthy. So this is like the second voyage over there. So they sat in the coast of right outside of England in the water, waiting for the storms to go away. Okay, so they are eating up 2 weeks of their supply. All right, then they travel through storms and sickness, and it took them 6 whole weeks to get to Virginia. So by the time they got there, they probably had 1 more day worth of supplies for all these people, and they're expecting to get off the boat and there's a town, there's these people, and everybody's happy, and everybody's living together, and it's prosperity, and a good place to eat, and all this. Well, their captain was Captain Newport, and he was only in charge on the trip. When they got there, he came with a box, this big wooden box, and in it were the names of the people that would be the rulers once, they would rule, be the governing body of the Virginia people when they got there. So nobody knew whose name was in there. So they land, and they finally landed in America on May 14th. And they landed off the Chesapeake Bay, which is right about here. And I might have showed y'all this, but right about here, right, Virginia, right there, Chesapeake Bay. Okay, doesn't say Chesapeake Bay, but that's what it is. Okay, so they landed there, and that night he opens a sealed box, and it contains the names of the men that are going to serve on this 7-man council. Okay, so we got 7 men that are now going to be their leaders. They don't get along. They're selfish. They're used to being having servants for them. They do not know how to work together. There was one good one in the middle of them, but the names of the people were Wingfield, I don't know his first name, Bartholomew Gosnell, and he was the good guy, John Smith, John Ratcliffe, John Martin, and George Kendall. Okay, Johns, a bunch of Johns. That was the most popular name, along with Captain Newport. All right, so it was a disaster. 6 of them, all but Gosnell, argued and fought about everything because they wanted to be in power. And they fought over the other men, with the other men in the council. They just didn't get along. They argued about where to settle. So they get there, and there's this land, and right when they got off the boat, okay, they land in like February, March. Okay, so it was low, and it was close to the sea, and Gosnell goes, let's just travel a little, let's kind of walk out the land, and let's find a place up high. Well, no, they don't want to do that because this land's right here, and they don't have to go anywhere, and they're very, very lazy. So they make their settlement right there because that's the easy thing to do. They don't have to carry their supplies very far. They're very, very, very lazy people. So they do. Well, it was a big mistake. Summer hits, and it becomes a marshland. Marshland brings mosquitoes. They died of malaria. They got sick. It was swamp. They were living in a swamp. they build this kind of fort thing. I don't know if you ever, I was hoping I'd find a picture of it, but Jamestown, they built it in a triangle with these three little circle things that were kind of like their tower lookouts. And they put all these little huts inside there. They did as little as possible work because they were gentlemen. They didn't want to work. So let's see where I am. Okay, the gentlemen from England have this code of ethics, and if you break the code, to be a gentleman, that means you don't work, you have servants, and you kind of make a promise not to work. So for them to dig or shovel anything or chop wood would be breaking their code of ethic. And, they're gentlemen, so, they're not going to break their code of ethic, which is crazy. They're in a new land. They have to work. But they didn't. They were very selfish. They acted like children. Then Newport, remember the guy that was the captain on the boat, he takes 40 of the strongest men, and they go looking, they just leave one night in the middle of the night looking for the Northwest Passage. So they're gone. There goes all that good, strong workers, although they weren't willing to work, so what does it matter? And then, so John Smith kind of became the leader, and he was charged with, well, wait a minute, let me read this. Okay, they were accused by the settlers that stayed, were accused by the Parsegan Indians for stealing food, which they did. So that led to an ambush a couple days later, which killed 1/5 of the settlers. And then to get the Indians, scare the Indians, they fired their cannon, which became kind of their mode of warring. They would just get on the boat, fire the cannon, it would go and knock down a bunch of trees and scare the Indians, and they would run because they had never seen anything like that. So they fired their cannon and got rid of the Indians. But during all this chaos and all this craziness, and there was the Reverend Hunt. And he made it mandatory that you had to come to his services. He preached salvation. He tried to preach to these gentlemen to be humble and to work hard, and told them what the scripture said about if you don't work hard, you don't eat. But they would come to his service, and they would come in late just to prove their point that they did not want to be there. They would sit on the front row, and they would just roll their eyes and act like he was talking to anybody but them. And so none of, Hunt just seemed like he had a ministry that was going absolutely nowhere because nobody wanted to listen. He actually worked very hard to show them what to do. So he made this grist mill that they showed them how to put the corn through the mill, and it would make grain so they could make bread. I mean, he did everything he could to be an example to them of how they should live, but they, did not really want anything to do with it. And remember Gosnell, the only one that had any brains and any smartness, he got typhoid fever that summer, and he died. So he was kind of the word of wisdom along with Hunt, Reverend Hunt. And so after that, the council went to pot because there was nobody. 2 of the members accused 2 of the other members of I don't know what, and arrested them. And so they're running out of supplies. It was just a mess. They're running out of supplies. So they turned to stealing from the Indians. And Powhatan, who was the Parsegan Indian chief, he found Smith had killed 2 of his men, so they went and got Smith and brought him before their council, their Indian council. And so Smith, he was a very fast talker, he was a really good liar, and he could tell tall tales. He was a salesman. So he brings out this compass, and I actually have a picture because I tried to find pictures, but see, this compass, so you know what a compass is. And he explained to them that it was magic and that it had a spirit in it, and the spirit always went to north because compasses did, and that they could use it. And then he explained how the sun, the earth it spun on its axis, and rotated on its axis and revolved around the earth, and the earth was round and everything. And he's getting to the point that on the other side of the earth is a white chief that is coming around the earth to save him. And that when he arrives, he's going to have these big old guns that are going to shoot 3 fields. That's how far they're going to shoot, and they're going to knock down trees. And he's on his side, John Smith's side. So the Indians, this was to scare the Indians, because the Indians had set up these 2 huge rocks, and they were going to put Smith's head on one and take the other one and crush his skull. Well, Smith in his book wrote that the Powhatan's daughter, Pocahontas, wanted to save his life, so she laid her head on top of his and wouldn't let them kill him. That was probably his propaganda and a lie. The thing is, he coerced with his little compass and his intimidation that these big guns are coming, and so Powhatan let him free, and even gave him, this guy was a con artist, gave him corn. So John Smith comes back and shocks everybody walking into the camp with corn. And that winter, the Indians literally kept them alive. They gave them venison, they gave them corn, even to their own almost starvation themselves. They helped these people. And you would think that they would say, oh, we need to start planting. But they just kept going, no, and we're not going to plant corn because supplies are coming. They're all, they were always like, checks in the mail, the supplies are coming on the boat. And so they never wanted to work. So, okay, turn page, hold on. Okay. So Newport had gone back home. He had taken some of the ore that he had found he never found the Northwest Passage because they're still looking for Marco Polo's India. But he did find these pieces of ore that he was hoping were gold, and he had taken them back to England, and no, they were not gold. But he came back right when, okay, hold on. Just in time, because Smith's last 2 councilmen, Martin and Ratcliffe, were fixing to cast off on a boat, and they were going back for supplies, but they were probably never coming back, and he made them stay. But out of the 144 men that had come, only 38 were living by now, and the rest were, really, really skinny and dying. Back home, the preachers were still preaching that, oh man, you need to buy a ticket to America, to Virginia, because you can go save the Indians. And he was telling them all the propaganda about how wonderful the land was and the food. He was leaving out the whole thing about how terrible the government was, how many deaths were happening, and the Indian attacks, and the Virginia Company was doing executions of people that disobeyed them. And so it was a huge cover-up of what was really going on. And then they published Smith's book, which was full of lies. It was called True Relations. And he told the story about Pocahontas, which was a lie. And he told about all the missionary exploits they'd gone on, which they hadn't they hadn't saved a single Indian. They weren't saved themselves. And, about this mass evangelism that they were doing with the Indians. So people continued to invest money, and people continue to come, which is crazy. And a lot of them, it was just a gamble to find gold. A lot of them were coming for the totally wrong reason. So these people with sick people would land on the island. They would expect to find food or anything, and any kind of luxury, but there was nothing like that waiting for them. They would see these scrawny men that, and then they would realize, oh my gosh, these are the Englishmen that left that were so full and hungry. I mean, full of food and so healthy. And now they're in threads and they're so skinny. So they realized that they'd been sold a pack of lies. In the winter of 1608, to make it worse, there was a huge fire and it burned down the whole Jamestown in minutes. It burned down their food supply, most of it, their blankets, their bedding, their clothes. Reverend Hunt lost all of his books, but he was the only one that didn't complain. He was the only godly man there. Many died because it happened in the winter and now they had no shelter. And so that spring, the compassion of the Indians kept them alive. Instead of planting corn, though, like the Indians were doing and would have been glad to teach them, they just wouldn't work. And they just kept thinking, well, supplies are coming. So then they had new people coming all the time. So they set up this black market where they would steal from the Indians, then sell it to the people that had money. So there were people that were literally overweight because they had so much food because they had come from England with money. And then the people that had lived there forever had no money, so they couldn't buy off the black market. So they were starving, and nobody helped anybody. They were just so selfish. They had also brought over 2 goldsmiths, 2 refiners, and a jeweler because they didn't want to make the same mistake of bringing back a ship full of rocks that weren't anything. So once again, greed won over reason, and they all started looking for gold instead of planting. And they were convinced that underneath where Jamestown had burnt down, that there was gold under there. So everybody dug. I guess now the gentleman thought it was okay to dig. They started digging for gold, and they loaded the whole ship full of these rocks that they found that just could be gold. I don't know about those refiners and those goldsmiths that came along with them because they got it wrong. So John Smith still is stealing corn from the Indian. That's the only way they can get food. And this made for terrible relationships with the Indians. And so the next summer was brutally hot. And everything that they had planted, if some of them planted, just shriveled up and died. And by the second year, the death rate was 1 out of every 10 lived. So 9 out of every 10 people that came had died. And every year it was like that. 1619, 1,200 came. By 1620, there was only 200 alive. So 1,000 have died. 1621, 1,580 souls came. And by time it was over, there was only 297 still living, and they still keep coming. Then the Indians finally decided to retaliate, and they led a huge massacre, and they killed all but 1/3 of them. So in spite of all this, the ships kept coming, and people kept coming in beliefs that they were coming to evangelize and find gold, and somehow but in the midst of it, they didn't bring ministers. They didn't bring anybody that could minister, so it's not like they really were coming over like the ministers had listened to their own sermons and decided, okay, I'll give up my life to go over there and evangelize. But the truth was actually beginning to filter into England, and people were starting to hear the truth, and they were beginning to think, okay, I don't know if what they're telling us is exactly true. So the people that came, bless their hearts, because most of them didn't live. So that's it for today. Hopefully, we're going to get to some good parts of America. I know we are, because we haven't gotten to the Mayflower yet. And those were the good people that came. So up until now, it's just been people that have been very selfish, looking for gold, and not really having the heart for God. But God had a reason for making America and for showing them that it's here. So first comes the bad, and then the good's going to come. And it's still a great place to live. So anyway, God bless y'all. Have a wonderful day. Bye.